Behold the face of Akhenaten, the heretic king, the breaker of temples, the man who dared to silence the voices of eternity. In an age when 1,000 gods whispered through stone and shadow, he rose to power. He turned his back on the ancient gods of Egypt's immortal dead and proclaimed one, the burning disk in the sky, Aten, giver of light, devourer of gods. 3,300 years before this very night, long before Rome would rise from dust and blood, this king shattered heaven itself. In the 5th year of his reign, the world changed. His name reborn, his capital torn from the desert, his command absolute. For 12 long years the gods were cast into the darkness, their names chiseled away, their temples left to die in the silence. 17 years upon the throne, and then death. No witness, no record, no mercy. Did disease consume him from within? Did plague stalk the land like unseen demons? Or did unforeseen hands, loyal to the old gods, drag him into the abyss? No man can say. The moment he is gone, the temple stirred, the old gods awaken, the many return, the one is forgotten, and Akhenaten, the king who defied eternity, he is cast out, erased, condemned to wander history as a ghost without a name. And the new king? The new king was Tutankhamun. He restored the gods. He raised again the temples of Amun. He called the old names back from silence and gave Egypt his soul. And for this, the crown was too heavy, a body too frail, a reign too brief. He ruled but a handful of years and died in the shadow of his youth. Countless centuries passed. Empires fell to dust. Yet one tomb remained, sealed, waiting. Until in 1922, a man named Howard Carter broke the silence of the ages, and the boy king, well, he rose again. Not in flesh, but in name. To the people of the Nile, immortality was not flesh, not bone, but memory. So long as a name is spoken, the soul endures. So long as the living remember, the dead are never truly gone. And what then is Tutankhamun's reward for restoring the gods? Not gold, not power, not the fleeting breath of life, but something greater, something eternal. Every whisper of his name, every gaze upon his golden face, every telling of his story across the world, feeds the flame of his existence beyond the grave. The boy king lives every time his name is spoken. Long live King Tutankhamun.
Now when he was a young man, he never thought he'd see people stand in line to see the boy king. If I'd known they'd line up just to see him, I'd taken all my money and bought me a museum. Buried with a donkey, dancing by the Nile.
Disco
The ladies love this style,
boss
rockin' for a mile.
rockin'
He ate a crocodile.
Born in Arizona, moved to Babylonia. Born in Arizona,
Got a condo made of stoner.
In New Orleans, the dead don't go quietly underground. They rise, marble and granite pushed up above the mud like stubborn old riverboats refusing to sink. That's because this city was built on water in denial. A fever dream balanced between the Mississippi River and the swamp. Dig too deep here and the earth sweats back at you. Coffins float, graves flood. The ground reminds you who really owns this place. So New Orleans learned early that if you wanted permanence, if you wanted your family remembered after the hurricanes and yellow fever and bad business deals washed everybody else away, you built upwards. Not cemeteries exactly, but little stone neighborhoods for the dead. Cities of ghost and memory. And then the 19th century happened. That glorious era when rich people became absolutely intoxicated with ancient Egypt. Napoleon storms into Egypt chasing empire and accidentally kicks off one of the greatest aesthetic movements in Western history. Suddenly, Europe and America can't get enough of pyramids, obelisks, sphinx, hieroglyphics, and stories about eternity. Egypt became shorthand for immortality itself, a civilization old enough to make Rome look like a strip mall. Naturally, cemetery architects lost their minds over it. Now take all that and drop it into New Orleans, a city already marinating in Catholic ritual, candle smoke, funeral marches, river mythology, and the uncomfortable understanding that death is not some distant abstraction, but a loud neighbor sitting on the porch with you, drinking your beer. Of course Egyptian tombs took root here. How could they not? Ancient Egypt and New Orleans are both river civilizations after all. Places where water gives life and threatens destruction in the same breath. The Nile and the Mississippi, they're cousins in spirit. Both create wealth from the mud. Both flood, both demand ritual. Both teach people that survival depends on respecting forces bigger than themselves. By the time you arrive at Metairie Cemetery here, you realize the whole thing has become an architectural arms race among New Orleans' recent wealthy dead. Bankers, sugar barons, cotton men, old Creole families trying desperately to outlast memory itself. One family builds an obelisk, another one builds a pyramid. Somebody adds a sphinx, somebody else throws in lotus columns and winged suns like they're decorating a casino on the edge of eternity. Walking through Metairie feels less like visiting a cemetery and more like wandering through the dreams of a Victorian undertaker who's drinking way too much absinthe and read way too many archaeological journals. We didn't come all the way out to Metairie Cemetery to look at pyramids. We came out for this. This is the grave of the world famous novelist Anne Rice, one of my favorite authors. She's a contemporary of King. She's maybe not as poetic as Poe, but she's so much more lovable than Lovecraft. But she ranks right up amongst the very top of American writers, at least in my opinion, and quite honestly, that's the only one that matters right this second. But Anne Rice, New Orleans badass. We'll come back and do a lot more on her. I want to do something on her own life, but may your memory live forever. Thank you so much for everything you did. All right, this time we are here at St. Louis Cemetery number 1 to talk about a pyramid. But first, let me introduce you to Sequoia, my AI assistant here.
Good evening, Eddy. I'm doing well and I'm glad to be chatting.
All right, tell me about St. Louis Cemetery number 1 in New Orleans.
St. Louis Cemetery number 1. Now that's a piece of history. It's the oldest extant cemetery in the city, established in 1789. It's famous for its above-ground tombs, which were influenced by French and Spanish burial customs. You've got a mix of history and legend in there, from the voodoo queen Mary Laveau to some of the city's early influential families. It's not just a burial ground, it's a testament to the city's cultural layers.
And tell me about Nicolas Cage and his pyramid tomb.
That pyramid tomb is quite the head-turner. So in St. Louis Cemetery number 1, Nicolas Cage bought himself a future resting place, a 9-foot-tall white pyramid. It stands out for sure among all the old tombs. The Latin inscription on it reads Omnia ab uno, which means everything from one. Those Egyptian revival designs swept through New Orleans in the 19th and early 20th centuries. It's like we were pulling ancient grandeur into our own story. Graves topped with obelisks, pyramids, and even sphinxes. There's something about New Orleans, always blending the old world with the new and making it our own.
And who's the most famous residents of St. Louis Cemetery number 1?
I'd say the crown jewel of famous residents is the voodoo queen herself, Mary Laveau. She's legendary. Blending Catholicism and voodoo, she became a figure of awe. Even today, people leave offerings at her tomb hoping for a little spiritual favor. And whether she's still working her magic or not, her presence still looms large in New Orleans lore.
Forget everything that Hollywood has taught you about voodoo in New Orleans. It's all wrong. And to find out what's really going on, let's go to the Voodoo Museum, just right up here. Now, when most people hear the word voodoo, they immediately picture some sweaty guy in a top hat hexing tourists with chicken bones while lightning crashes in the background like some dang Scooby-Doo episode. Folks think it's all curses, zombie powder, hunted dolls, and Nicolas Cage buying skull-shaped candles at 3 in the morning.
Voodoo ritual?
Yes, voodoo ritual. I was about to sacrifice this chicken.
But that chicken's not alive.
Real New Orleans voodoo is way older, deeper, and honestly, a whole lot more interesting than that. It comes out of West African spiritual traditions brought over by enslaved people who had somehow managed to hold on to a piece of their culture while the world was actively trying to grind it out of them. Then, New Orleans happened, which means everything got mixed together like a gumbo. African beliefs met French Catholicism, Spanish Catholicism, local folk magic, river superstition, cemetery culture, and that uniquely New Orleans habit of treating the line between the living and the dead more like a suggestion than a hard and fast rule. So now you got candles burning beside Catholic saints. You got prayers in French mixed with African rhythms. You got offerings left at gravesites, music, dancing, chanting, healing rituals, and ancestor reverence, spiritual cleansing. The whole thing feels ancient and alive at the same time. And to outsiders, yeah, it can look unusual as hell, especially to mainstream America, where religion usually happens in fluorescent buildings beside a Chick-fil-A. New Orleans voodoo is emotional, physical, symbolic. It spills out into the streets and cemeteries and front porches. It has drums and smokes and layers of meaning. And because Americans tend to panic when religion stops looking neat and organized, people turn voodoo into a monster story. And of course, Hollywood made it worse. Every movie for 50 years basically said, beware the spooky island lady with the snake and the glowing eyes. Meanwhile, most actual practitioners are over there praying for protection, guidance, health, money, love, or peace of mind. Basically the exact same thing everybody else asks for in church, just with more candles and significantly better music. That's the thing people miss. Voodoo survived because it helped people survive. It gave enslaved and oppressed communities a sense of identity, power, connection, healing, and hope in a very brutal world. That's the real story underneath all the tourist shop nonsense on Bourbon Street. And honestly, the reason voodoo feels so tied to New Orleans is because the city itself operates on the exact same frequency. New Orleans has always been a place where cultures collide, where ghosts sit beside cocktails, where life and death dance together in the same parade, where people laugh at funerals and cry at jazz songs and build above-ground tombs that look like tiny Greek temples and Egyptian pyramids, because apparently subtlety was never part of the local architectural code. Now voodoo fits right there because New Orleans itself feels halfway between two worlds. Now, Mary Laveau was a baptized Catholic who attended Mass regularly throughout her long life. And that fact tends to short-circuit modern people's brains just a little bit. Folks today want religion sorted into neat little boxes. Catholic over here, voodoo over there. Everybody wearing name tags so theology stays organized. New Orleans never worked that way. In 19th century Louisiana, Catholicism already carried a heavy sense of ritual and mystery. Candles flickered before saints, incense curling through church air, holy water, prayers for the dead, processions through old streets. African and Caribbean spiritual traditions arriving in New Orleans found points of connection inside that world, instead of total opposition. So for Mary Laveau, attending Mass, praying to saints, and practicing spiritual rituals rooted in African traditions may not have felt contrary at all. To outsiders, especially Protestant Americans, this looked strange as hell. To New Orleans, that just looked like religion. And Marie Laveau moved through all those layers. Now here's the part Hollywood usually skips. Marie Laveau didn't become legendary just because people thought she had mystical powers. She became powerful because she built relationships and helped people. Historical accounts describe her visiting prisoners and praying with condemned men, nursing the sick during yellow fever outbreaks, helping poor women and struggling families, offering spiritual counseling and folk healing, and acting as a trusted figure in communities that official society often ignored. Even historians skeptical of the more supernatural stories agree. She held enormous social influence, and yes, people both feared and respected her, but not usually in the cartoon horror movie way modern audiences imagine. It was more the kind of fear people have towards somebody who seems deeply connected, spiritually powerful, intelligent, and impossible to control. Rich people reportedly consulted her quietly, publicly mocking voodoo. Politicians paid attention to her influence. Working class residents respected her. Desperate people sought her help because humans have always become a lot more spiritually flexible once life starts falling apart around them. Part of her reputation comes from performance too. Marie Laveau understood mystery before America invented celebrity culture. Public rituals, whispered stories, dramatic appearances, rumors of miracles and curses, all of it built an aura around her. And New Orleans, being a city that treats gossip like competitive athletics, helped turn her into mythology almost immediately. But underneath all the ghost stories and tourist shop nonsense was a real woman, navigating race, faith, power, survival, and spirituality in one of the most culturally complicated cities in America, which honestly might be more impressive than the legend.
Rhiannon rings like a bell through the night. Wouldn't you love to love her?
In Western Europe, the witch isn't born in folklore as a villain. She's shaped into one. By the time the European witch trials are in full swing, she's already been recast as the woman who won't bend, lives alone, knows things she wasn't supposed to learn, survives without men's permission, and that's where the anti-hero edge, it comes in. She's not evil, she's inconvenient. Healer who might also curse. A midwife who understands life and death better than the institutions trying to control it. A woman operating outside the rules in a world that punishes exactly that. The label witch becomes less about magic and more about control. Who has it and who's not allowed to have it. That's classic anti-hero territory right there. She doesn't follow the moral script, she follows her own. And the Black Cat locks that identity into place. Not as a sidekick, mind you, but as a mirror. In European mythology, the cat is her familiar, her extension, sometimes even her second self. It moves through the dark, unseen, self-directed, no loyalty to hierarchy, no instinct to obey. The same traits that make the witch threatening are baked into the animal. Together, they form a kind of quiet rebellion, two figures that exist outside the system, answering to no one but themselves. That's the real story here. Not a villain and her pet, but an anti-hero, and the symbol that proves she never needed permission in the first place.
Here in my garden of magic.
Back in the 1970s, Mary Toups led an alternative coven down here. She and her sister witches would gather there proudly and publicly, very much in the spirit of the times.
Mary Toups doesn't come out of some shadowy European lineage or a candlelit castle full of inherited secrets. She comes out of Louisiana, which might be the more interesting origin story actually. Born into a fairly ordinary southern world, church bells, expectations, the quiet pressure of conformity. There's nothing on paper that says this is where a witch begins. No elite education, no formal theological training, no official initiation into the old European orders. What she has instead is something so much more volatile: curiosity, independence, and a willingness to read what most people wouldn't touch. Mid-century occult books, ritual manuals, fragments of older traditions. All of it gets pulled apart and reassembled on our own terms. This isn't apprenticeship, it's construction. And then there's New Orleans, the real classroom, a place where Louisiana Voodoo sits just beneath the surface, where Catholic candles burn next to older, quieter beliefs, where the dead don't disappear as much as relocate. Tups doesn't invent that world, she recognizes it, leans into it, reshapes it. By the time she founds the religious order of witchcraft, she's not passing down some ancient untouched tradition. She's doing something far more American, building her own system in public, and daring the city to react. No credentials, no permission, just a woman deciding who she is and then making it real enough that other people start to believe it too. So that's the Vampire Cafe. So if you're a vampire, you absolutely know where you can get something to eat. So yeah, I was just in there, and this is how it went.
Ah, the Vampire Cafe, nestled right there in the quarter, it's a little theatrical slice of the macabre. It leans into New Orleans vampire lore. Think dark ambiance, lots of reds and blacks, and a menu that's got that playful gothic twist. You'll find dishes with names nodding to blood and immortality. Don't worry, it's all quite deliciously normal. And of course, you'll find some themed cocktails that might make you feel a bit more vampiric by the end of the night. It's a fun spot if you're in the mood for something a bit more immortal. The shrimp and grits is kind of like a cozy love letter to Southern comfort food. You've got plump shrimp, usually sauteed with a bit of garlic, maybe some smoky sausage or bacon in the mix, and it's all ladled over creamy, buttery grits. Every chef has their twist. Some add a tomato-based sauce, others go creamier. It's rich, savory, and when done right, gets like a warm hug that reminds you you're in the South. Oh, the creme brulee. Now that's a dessert with a bit of theater to it. You've got this silky custard, vanilla's the classic flavor, but sometimes folks get creative. And then that caramelized sugar crust on top. They torch it right before serving so you get that satisfying crack when you tap it with a spoon. It's smooth, rich, and that combo of creamy and crunchy is just a little bit of dessert magic. The little chocolate bats? Well, imagine a playful nod to the vampire theme. They're typically small, dark chocolate treats molded into cute little bat shakes. Sometimes solid, sometimes filled with something like ganache or caramel. They're bite-sized and add that whimsical, slightly spooky flair to a dessert plate. Just enough to make you smile before they vanish, just like a bat in the night. A lot of folks who enjoy it talk about the vibe. It's immersive, a little cheeky, and fun if you're into that gothic atmosphere. They'll say the staff really leans into the theme, making it a unique experience. And often, people highlight the cocktails, creative, well-mixed, and a great conversation piece. Basically, if you're in for a quirky night, it delivers.
New Orleans was soaked in rain. Water slid down iron balconies. Streetcars hummed through the dark.
Inside a narrow old shotgun house sat little Anne, tiny, pale, quiet. Beside her sat Poe the raven, pecking at a biscuit like a tiny feathered pirate. At the dinner table, Anne's parents argued again. But to Anne, it sounded like... Then the old black and white TV crackled. The Beatles are in New Orleans tonight. Anne slowly looked up. On the TV, they said it again. The Beatles are in New Orleans tonight. Mother gasps. Father drops his oyster fork. Grandmother accidentally summons concern from beyond the grave. Then the fighting resumes. Anne slowly looks up from a copy of Dracula. Her enormous dark eyes gleam. Thunder crashes. The raven applauds. Somehow, she had an idea. I know just what to do. Anne rides the St. Charles streetcar through humid darkness carrying a tiny black purse shaped like a coffin. The car is packed with screaming teenage girls in pastel dresses. Anne sits silently between them, dressed like a Victorian child who had just escaped a tuberculosis ward. Anne watches rain drip down the windows like tears from God himself. Then she smiles faintly. The city smells like wet roses, cigarettes, and bad decisions. Perfect. Outside City Park Stadium, it is absolute chaos. Teen girls scream like medieval peasants witnessing a miracle. The police officers look spiritually exhausted. One girl faints before even hearing music. Beatles hair! Get your Beatles hair here!
Why? Don't they need their hair?
If you've been enjoying this video and want to help us keep exploring the Gulf Coast, consider joining Gulf Coastal Connections as a channel member. You get exclusive perks like our members-only podcast, custom emojis, and badges that show your support for this community. Just hit that join button below to check it out. It really helps us keep the stories rolling. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. It's free, it only takes a second, and it makes a world of difference. Hitting that little red button and the bell beside it means you'll never miss our latest adventures, ghost stories, and our Gulf Coastal history deep dives. And of course, smash that little button if you've had a good time. It helps more folks find these videos and keeps our little Gulf Coastal family growing. Most of all, drop a comment and join the conversation. Always meant this to be a two-way street, because if it's just me talking, well, that's not a conversation, that's a monologue. So tell me what you think, share your stories, and let's keep this thing going together. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your support.